So on Sunday, Mark Carney is going to become the leader of the Liberal Party. Yeah, don't worry. I know there are other candidates, but none of them are going to even come close to Carney. That means somewhere in the next week, Justin Trudeau will step down as Prime Minister, finally, and Carney will become the Prime Minister. What does that really mean? I don't think it means that very much. Carney and Trudeau have very similar views on things. Carney's are a little more sophisticated than Trudeau's. He speaks them in a more adult tone. But for instance, on the carbon tax, Carney just wants to take Justin Trudeau's carbon tax, which Carney has been advising him for years to continue increasing. Carney wants to take that carbon tax and hide it in corporate costs so that it'll raise the prices for consumers at the retail level, but it won't be attacked on the way it is at the gas pump. And they're hoping then, in the Liberal brains trust, that you won't mind. Well, you'll mind exactly the same way you minded when the carbon tax was charged on the trucks that were bringing your groceries to the grocery store, and groceries went up by about 35% in the last 2 years. Of course you're going to notice. Of course you're going to mind. But that's the kind of thinking that the Liberals are all about. Oh, Mark Carney's going to save us, because he's smarter than Justin at doing the same things. Take a look at pipelines. Carney has said, yes, I'm in favor of pipelines. But if you look really, really carefully at most of his statements and most of his policies, he almost never mentions the word oil. He is first and foremost an environmentalist. He is a firm believer in the climate alarmism. And he wants very much to end oil. He doesn't speak much about oil. When he's talking about building a stronger Canadian economy to face off against Trump, he almost never mentions oil, which is our #1 export. And yes, one time in Kelowna, about a month ago, he said, we could use our emergency powers as a federal government to build pipelines east and west in Canada so that we no longer have to ship most of our oil through the United States. But then the next day, when he was asked in Quebec whether that meant he would use the emergency powers to force a pipeline through Quebec, he said, oh, of course not. No, I would never do that. Never ever force Quebec. That is a typical Liberal response. You say one thing in Quebec, you say another thing in the rest of Canada, and you hope nobody notices. That's par for the course for the Liberals. So when Mark Carney replaces Justin Trudeau, we're going to have more of the same from the Liberals. And the other thing I think is going to happen is you're going to see the cozy relationship between the Liberals and the CBC get even cozier. 2 weeks ago, Pascal Saint-Onge, who's the Heritage Minister, who's in charge of the CBC, said that the CBC was absolutely essential to our national security. Not our national culture, not our national identity. Yes, she mentioned those too. But she said specifically, in so many words, the CBC is essential to our national security. I suppose if we suddenly start finding Russian bombers overhead, we're going to send CBC reporters out to hector them and moralize about it until they turn around and go home. It's ridiculous. And now this week, Melanie Joly, who is the Foreign Affairs Minister, said the CBC is as essential to Canadian democracy and Canadian security as Parliament and the courts. The CBC is such an essential institution in Canada. We cannot possibly think about defunding it or even changing its funding a little. In fact, Melanie Joly said we should double the CBC's budget to about $3 billion a year. She said, this is not a conservative or a Liberal issue. Of course it is. When was the last time you watched the CBC and they had anything nice to say about conservatives? Yes, the CBC sometimes during scandals are very good at digging up dirt on the Liberals. On the blackface scandal for Trudeau, on the wee cherries, on lots of others. They have done good work. But the instant the writs are dropped in an election, they circle their wagons around the divine right to rule Liberal Party, and they do everything they can to besmirch and smear the Conservatives so the Liberals will win again. And we're going to see more of that after this weekend, once Mark Carney gets to be the leader of the Liberal Party. For Post Media, I'm Lorne Gunter.